MLB DFS picks for DraftKings. Sunday, June 16th, Father's Day. Who are our pitchers? Who are the stacks? We're going to start with Miles Mikolas, the Lizard King himself. He's been okay this season. Would love for the strikeout rate to be higher, but he's not walking batters. Swinging strike, not great, but he is only 6,400. Ultimately, we love the matchup. 24% K rate from the Cubs versus right-handed pitching. WOBA, a little bit below average. WRC plus below average, not much power. And then over the last week, the Cubs have been extremely cold. Their savings, not much more to break down there, although we do have an 11-run total in this game. If you don't like that, that's fine. We got two lefties in our Miami versus Washington matchup, both of them in the middle tier. Jesus Luzardo at 7,600, Mitchell Parker at 8,200. And they're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. Luzardo, big swinging strike rate at 15%. Although you expect that K rate to be a little bit higher, not quite getting the results, and that becomes clear when we look at his ERA versus his SIERA. His Skills Interactive ERA says this guy should be better than that 5.11. And when we see the swinging strike rate and the K percentage, it makes a lot of sense. Limiting hard contact, maybe a little bit too many fly balls, but we don't really need to worry about that in a matchup against the Nationals. 23% K rate versus lefties. No pop whatsoever with the 100 ISO. Look at that low WOBA, WRC plus. Miami in a good spot against a team not hitting lefties. They have heated up a little bit over the last week, but when we adjust for the matchup, you got to like Luzardo, especially at that price. Now, the problem is he may not get the win because it could be Mitchell Parker. Not really a big-time strikeout guy with a 19% K rate, a control guy, very much like a modern Greg Maddux. 3.21 ERA, better than his Skills Interactive ERA, but you would expect that because he doesn't really fit the modern mold of strike everybody out type of pitcher, which a lot of the advanced analytics always love. So he's a pitcher that we're typically going to see with a better ERA than a SIERA or XFIP. Does not walk by, guys. He just hits his spots. He is a Greg Maddux type, gets ground balls. Now, the strikeouts aren't really there, and the Marlins against lefties aren't really a team that strikes out. But that kind of suits Mitchell Parker, is he doesn't want to strike you out. They don't really strike out, but they find ways to get themselves out. And so you could really easily see Mitchell Parker going very deep into this game because the Marlins match up right into like what he wants to do is, here, can you just ground this out real quick for me? Thanks, and I'm going to get out of here. And the Marlins are more than welcome to do that against lefties. Cold all season against lefties, and really cold of late. And that's why we see Parker as the favorite in this game. Problem with Luzardo, he can get you the Ks, but could he get the win? Dylan Cease, don't really need to go into that. You know what his numbers are this season if you want to pay up. He's a guy who can pile up the strikeouts. Matchup is fine. Not the best matchup, but neutral to okay. And if we look at the Mets over the last week, maybe it makes that matchup even look better. Now, they're not striking out, but hey, this is Dylan Cease, so we can definitely amplify that. Bailey over. Don't really love Bailey, but I like the matchup against Oakland. I believe we had a different start originally on the board for this. If I look back at my other sheet, I think originally we were looking at Chris Paddock, but whatever, we got Bailey over, and the matchup still works. And Ober's numbers overall, XWOBA allowed 317, we'll take that. 386 SIERA, much better than his actual ERA. The strikeouts at 24%, we like it. Swinging strike rate, 12%, we like it. Numbers are good. Gives up a little bit too many fly balls, maybe a little bit too much hard contact, but it's Oakland, 27% K rate against righties. Not a lot of power. WOBA, well below average, WRC plus well below average, and then we look at what Oakland's doing over the last week, a 30% K rate. They are not in a good spot, so over 8,400, and that's why they're a minus 172 favorite. Over under 8.5, not terrible. Who else are we looking at from our pitchers? Dane Dunning, a pitcher that I've gone to way too many times this season, expecting him to be better than what he does in real life because he's got the 398 SIERA, but a 480 ERA. His underlying metrics are good, but he just can't win games. can't get through games. 26% K rate, which is actually higher than the swinging strike rate. But this 11% walk rate really kills him. The 37% hard contact rate really comes back to kill him. Way too many home runs. That's been this story with Dane Dunning. He's got great stuff, but seemingly every game he gets popped. This is a matchup where he can get away with not getting popped. Facing Seattle in a park that leans much more towards the pitchers. Seattle striking out 28% of the time against righties. A little pop, but not much. Woba down. And then we look at Seattle over the week. Yeah, they've heated up a little bit, but this is not a team that you worry about. He can strike people out. The question always comes back to Dunning is, sure, he's going to pile up the strikeouts, but then he gets in a jam and he gives up the damn home runs. And we can see that here. 9.8 Ks per 9. Walk rate gets a little high. The 1.8 home runs per 9 is way too high. Now, being a fly ball pitcher, he's always going to have probably a lower BABIP than other people. And so for sometimes when I see a hitter with a pitcher with a 231 BABIP, I'm like, regression's coming. But when it comes to a fly ball pitcher like him, I don't think you really are as concerned. And positively, though, like a 68% left on base strand rate, like that should get better. He actually gives up quite a bit of ground balls. He's not been a fly ball guy. But when he does give up a fly ball, it goes over the fence. A 22% home run to fly ball rate. He keeps the ball on the ground for the most part. He strikes batters out. He should be much better than what he is. The problem is that when he does give up the fly ball, it goes over the fence. And giving a hard contact, which happens when you throw a lot of heat, that can happen. It's dangerous, but if there was a time to flirt with a guy who should be much better, 389 xFIP versus the 480 ERA, it's against a matchup against Seattle. Again, 28% K rate. Striking out a lot more over the last week. Also in that matchup, though, is Logan Gilbert, a guy who his numbers actually come through. Doesn't have a 360 xWOBA. It's a 294. The Sierra at 352, 319 ERA, strikeout rate just a tad below Dane Dunning's, and he's not walking half as many batters, getting a high swinging strike rate, facing Texas, who obviously is not as bad as Seattle, but they're not playing that well of late. Texas, a 108 ICE over the last week, 274 WOBA, 75 WRC plus. It is a time where you can get away with attacking this team. And even on the season, they've just been okay. And that's why we got Logan Gilbert at a minus 142. And there's only a 7 over under on this, which is really surprising. The Vegas set it there knowing that Dane Dunning has home run problems. I guess Vegas believes that his home run problems are going to exist. And if his home run problems aren't there, then I think you absolutely can go to Dane Dunning getting strikeouts, getting through 6 innings, and hopefully not having that blow-up inning. And it is a park where he should be able to get away with it. But then again, if you've rostered Dane Dunning this season, you have said that plenty of times, and he doesn't get away with it. Now let's look at our stacks. Last team's probably not on the slate, but if you're playing Showdown, you like Boston against New York. Boston blew up yesterday, surprisingly, for a lot of runs, and they're in a spot again where they can blow up. K's can be a bit of a problem for Boston, but they're in a matchup against Marcus Stroman, who has always been a ground ball pitcher, who doesn't really strike out a lot of guys, just a 17% K rate. Now, Stroman's made a career out of doing this, the former Blue Devil with the bodybuilder dad. Speaking of dads on Father's Day, what a dad Stroman has, huh? That dude's frighteningly big. Anyway, so yeah, Stroman could get away with it again, just getting his ground balls, but he does pitch to a lot of contact. Boston, if they're not striking out, has a real potential to rip you up. So if you're playing a Sunday night slate, I like that. But again, you can't really count out Stroman because he's done it his entire career. It's not like some guy who just gets lucky. Like, he is a ground ball pitcher. He's not a strikeout pitcher. All right, next stack. This one really goes without explanation. Pittsburgh and Colorado. It's a Coors slate. And you've got 2 pitchers on the slate that are not good. Jelton Jeffries, I think, has pitched like 4 innings. We'll pull that up. And in those 4 innings, I believe he's given up several home runs. But he's got like a 3.9 home runs per nine. Now that's a 4.2 sample, but in his limited innings, not very good. Dakota Hudson has done a better job at keeping the ball in the ballpark at 0.9 home runs per nine. He does pitch and get the ground balls, which you can make work at Colorado. So you think, oh, well, maybe I don't want to play Pittsburgh. He still has a 5.14 xFIP and a 4.87 ERA. So why do the advanced metrics not like him? It is a good matchup. Both these offenses aren't really that great on the season, but it's still Coors. Well, look at this. In these 68 innings for Hudson, he is not striking batters out. He is walking batters. And he's kind of on the positive side of BABIP. Especially, well, although you'd actually expect that to be a little bit higher for a ground ball pitcher, because there's just so many balls in play that, typically ground ball pitchers have the higher BABIP. Either way, that could go a little bit higher. But this is the thing that stands out. This is why his xFIP is not very appealing. He doesn't strike you out. He walks too many people. That is a dangerous line to be walking in Colorado, where you're pitching to that much contact. We already know we don't like Dalton Jeffries. But Hudson, way too much contact. Pittsburgh puts the ball in play. Pittsburgh could score a bunch of runs. We saw a ton of runs in Colorado yesterday. All right, flying through here. Houston versus Kenta Maeda. Look at that xWOBA from Maeda, 343 attack. The Sierra, 473. His ERA is actually even worse. 18% K rate's too low. Walk rate's not terrible. No swinging strike rate. He's giving up fly balls. Now, he is limiting the hard contact, but I like my chances with Houston. Let's look at some more of the metrics on Maeda to see if it makes it even more appealing, why we want to stack. And here we go. 44 innings on the year. Again, not striking anybody out at 7.1 Ks per nine. The walk rate's a little bit high. 2.0 home runs per nine. We like that. We like our chances of getting a home run. Pretty high home run to fly ball rate. He is not stranding runners. That's why we're looking at Houston as a possible stack. Cincinnati, Milwaukee, we know that we've got the park in our favor. So anytime you're playing it, Coors or Cincinnati or Milwaukee, we're going to look at both teams. And both of these pitchers have been just okay. So definitely places that we can attack. We'll start with Colin Ray. A 358 expected WOBA that he's giving up to opposing hitters. Now his Sierra is much better than his ERA. So he's been pretty fortunate because, again, the skills interactive ERA, the advanced metrics say this guy's not that good. He has a 16% K rate, just a 7% swinging strike rate. Now, why is that significant? If you want to beat Cincinnati, you strike them out. 26% K rate versus righties. You don't pitch to contact. You don't allow Cincinnati to get on base because then they run all over you. Strike them out and you can beat them. Well, this is a guy that doesn't strike people out. And he's made it work in other games against other teams, and that's why his ERA is better than his Sierra. And he does limit hard contact. And he's been getting enough ground balls. But you would argue that Ray's been pretty fortunate. And this is a matchup where Cincinnati, their main weakness, which is the K, is it really going to exist in a hitter's ballpark? Let's look a little bit further at Colin Ray on our sheet over here. 70 innings pitched. K per nine, 6.1 to 2.9 walks. You expect actually that BABIP to get a little bit closer to 300. Actually, he is giving up 1.2 home runs per nine, but I think that's more of an artifact or the fact that he pitches in Milwaukee. It's always going to be up there, even if he is leaning a ground ball pitcher. Strand rate's at 82%. Now, you could say, wow, that's pretty good. Or you could say, man, maybe he's been a little bit fortunate. I think there's some regression coming. Obviously, we look at the 331 ERA versus the xFIP. You like it. And then we flip the table over, and we look at Milwaukee versus Frankie Montas. Montas has just been okay this season in its 55 innings. Maybe slightly worse than okay. There have been games where he's looked good, but Montas is a guy who's made 5-6 innings, gets a quality start, gives up 3 or 4 runs. He is definitely beatable. He's not striking out a lot. He's walking a little bit too much. 1.1 home runs per nine. Very similar to the thing that we talked about with Colin Ray, just pitching in a pitcher's ballpark or hitter's ballpark. That's always going to exist. He is not straining batters, so maybe there's a little bit of positive regression coming. But ultimately, we look at his numbers, and he pretty much is what he is. 4.55 ERA, 4.64 xFIP. Milwaukee can hit righties. No problem there. And our last stack of the day to look at would be Cleveland versus Jose Berrios. And another example of a pitcher with a 2.93 ERA, but his Sierra is 4.17. Skills Interactive doesn't like him because he doesn't strike out enough people. He is getting ground balls, but he's not really limiting hard contact. So he's pitching to bats. He's giving up hard contact. Cleveland is an offense, one of the best. I like Cleveland a lot more at home in the wind tunnel, but even in Toronto, Hitters Ballpark, various pitching contact, 8% swinging strike rate. It is a positive ballpark in Toronto. Cleveland shut out yesterday for the 5th time this season, only 5 times this season. But they did have just as many hits as Toronto. We look a little bit further. Our Cleveland stack, 86 innings pitched for Berrios, 6.7 K per 9, 2.3 walk, a lot of contact at 1.4 home runs per 9. 2.93 ERA, but his xFIP is 4.08, suggesting maybe he's been a little bit lucky. And again, ground ball pitcher with a pretty low BABIP. Typically, we would see that BABIP be a little bit higher. Eventually, that's going to regress, and a lot of these ground balls aren't necessarily going to go through. He's not striking people out, and he's fortunate to get the ground balls and to get the outs. Long run, that's not going to happen. BABIP's going to increase. Guys are going to get on board, and they're going to score. ERA is going to go up. That could be today for Cleveland. That'll do it for the Father's Day, June 16th slate. Like, subscribe, share. The spreadsheet is free in the description below. You got your traditional numbers. And then we got the simplified version where if you don't want to read ERA or whatever, you can just look at, all right, Corbin Burns. He has the 2nd best ERA on the slate. 7th best when it comes to hard contact. Or we look at Luzardo and say, oh, yeah, he's facing the offense with the 29th ranked ISO. They can't hit. No power there. Or we look at Berrios against Cleveland. They don't strike out. So if you want strikeouts, not going to get them. There it is. This is free spreadsheet. RaceForThePrize.com, NASCAR, MLB, a lot of content out there. Have a wonderful Father's Day, guys. Thanks for joining me. Blessed to have you around. Love you guys. Trip to Life, fantastic.